Hi friends, my name is Sarah, and I'm currently the Intentional Interim Minister with St. Andrew's United Church in Lacombe, Alberta. If you are watching this video, it means that you received the link via the email letter that I sent out to the St. Andrew's Community of Faith. Or you might have found it via our Facebook page or even this channel itself. No matter what brought you here, welcome. My husband John has graciously shared his YouTube channel, The Accessible Faith Project, with us during this time of pandemic as a place to share my weekly reflections. There are other videos on this channel which are an opportunity to learn more about the Bible, faith questions, and the like. And if you'd like to receive notifications of when new videos are posted, you can do so by clicking on the little bell icon that says subscribe and signing up. It's completely free. This week, I had the opportunity to have a raisin-filled English scone, something that I hadn't tasted in a very long time. And as I sat in the coffee shop and savored it, I was transported back in time down the hallways of memory. Does that ever happen to you? You're minding your own business, going about your day-to-day tasks. When you hear something or you see something, and suddenly you're taken to another place and time. That day, a simple scone brought back to me memories of my grandmother. And there I stood, watching in my mind's eye how my Nan used to always get up at the crack of dawn to make scones from scratch. The memory of Nan in her kitchen brought a smile to my face and a tear to my eye. And with it, more memories, like how she used her teaching skills to help me learn the Lord's Prayer by heart, and a number of the older hymns. And in that moment, it felt like my Nan was with me again. I ate the scone, and I remembered. And it seems to me that there is a natural connection between food and memory. I also know that other things such as music and pictures and really almost anything can beam us back into time and to walks down memory lane. But for me anyway, nothing seems to do it faster than food. I eat and I drink and I remember. And in the process, many friends, many family, many loved ones are with me once again. That need and desire to remember what God has done is at the heart of the Jewish celebration of Passover. Our reading from the book of Exodus for this morning tells about how God gave instructions to Moses and to Aaron to institute the Passover meal. God says to them, "You are to keep this day as a day of zakar, a day of remembrance, and to make it a pilgrim feast, a festival of the Lord, generation after generation. You are to observe it as a statute from all time. From the night that they were first delivered from Egypt and every year following, the Israelites were to eat the Passover meal as a way of remembering what God had done for them. They were to eat and to drink and to remember." The Hebrew people remembered how their lives had been an overwhelming, endless struggle. They could not begin to forget how they had been slaves in the land of Egypt. And as they ate the bitter herbs as God had instructed, it was not hard for them to remember the bitterness of their enslavement. Over the food and drink, they recalled how God had heard their cries for help and how God had sent Moses to them to be their leader. Nor could the Hebrew people forget what happened next in the story. They often retold how Moses went before the Pharaoh and demanded that he let God's people go. But this only made Pharaoh incredibly angry. And instead of letting the Hebrews free, Pharaoh made things worse. "I will not let your people go," the Pharaoh said. "They belong to me. Tell the Hebrews to get back to work." And the Hebrew people remembered how angry Pharaoh had been and how things became even harder for them. Before Moses had spoken to Pharaoh, they had made bricks out of straw and clay for the Pharaoh's big buildings. But because of his anger, Pharaoh told them, "You have to get your own straw. Go out into the fields to find it, but you have to make just as many bricks as before." And then the Pharaoh told his bosses to beat the people. if they didn't make enough bricks. And then, of course, the Hebrew people got mad at Moses because of all of the extra work that they had to do. "You asked Pharaoh to let us go," they said. "And what happens? We have to work harder. You just made things worse." And Moses naturally was upset. And he was incredibly upset by this, and he cried out to God. "Is this why you sent me here?" he said to God. "Now Pharaoh makes the people work harder. You made things worse," Moses said. And God says back, "Well, Moses, I made a promise, a covenant, to Abraham and to Sarah and to all of their children's children. I made a promise that they would be a great nation. And so go and tell my people, remember my promise." And so the Hebrew people were instructed to eat haroset, which is a mixture of apples and cinnamon and nuts. And this haroset was made to remind them of the bricks and the mortars that they used to build Pharaoh's buildings. And as they ate the haroset, they also remembered how God's promise was always with them, even in those days when they had to make more bricks, and they grumbled about it. In the next part of the story, the Hebrew people recalled how Moses did remind them of God's promise, as well as how God helped Moses try to make Pharaoh let the people go. The Hebrew people remembered how God turned the river to blood, and how zillions of frogs and bugs came, and how the cows and the sheep got sick, and how there were sores on the Egyptian people. They recalled how there was hail and lots of grasshoppers, and how one time it turned dark in the very middle of the day. The Hebrews remembered how these things happened only to the Egyptians and not to them. But these things were still not enough for Pharaoh, for he still would not let the Hebrew people go. And so God told Moses exactly what would happen. There would be one more plague. The Hebrews remembered how Moses explained it to them. He said to them, "Listen carefully. We're going to leave Egypt just as God has promised. Kill a small goat or a small sheep and roast it, and take some of the blood from the goat or the sheep and smear it on your front door. And that way God will know which houses are Hebrew and which ones are Egyptian." And that night the Hebrew people dressed in their traveling clothes, their sandals were on their feet, and their walking sticks were in their hand. They ate unleavened bread, for it did not have time to rise in their haste to leave Egypt. And they also ate the roasted sheep and roasted goat, and they smeared the blood on their doors. And as the Hebrew people ate, they said prayers of thanks and remembered all that God had done for them. And that night, God answered the prayers of the Hebrew people. A plague of death was brought upon the houses of the Egyptians, but it passed over the Hebrew houses. As a result, Pharaoh decided that it was time for the Hebrews to leave. And so the Hebrew people were freed from slavery in Egypt and committed themselves to Zakar, to remember God's promise, to remember how God was with them in all things. And every year since, the Hebrew people remember by celebrating what has come to be known as the Passover Meal. Each piece of it a reminder of how God was with them. The bitter herbs as a reminder of their times of suffering. The haroset a reminder of when they were enslaved and had to make bricks. The unleavened bread eaten as a reminder of the haste with which the Hebrew people had to leave Egypt when Pharaoh finally set them free. And the lamb that is eaten as a remembrance of how God had the Hebrew people slaughter a lamb that was without blemish and smear its blood on the doorposts and lintels, that is, the top part, or the door itself, as signs of God's grace. And when God saw the blood on the houses of the Israelites, God would pass over them. And so in doing all of these things, they remembered that they belonged to God. They eat, they drink, and they remember. For us as followers in the way of Jesus, our sharing in communion at God's table echoes many of the same things. Next month, for World Communion Sunday on October the 4th, we're planning to celebrate it together by Zoom. a lot different than what we normally do. But it's a way that we can still be together while maintaining physical distancing and what we need to do in order to keep one another safe, well, and healthy. And when we share together, we eat, we drink, and we remember God's love for us. But not just at that time. In all of our eating that we do, in all of our sharing together of stories and memories, whether it be by phone, by email, by card, by Facebook, or the like, may that spirit of community, that spirit of remembering that God is with us, always be so. Thanks be to God. Amen.